Now, one final use case here, which is arguably one you might find yourself using if you still have physical equipment there in your data center. Veeam for a long time really focused its attentions only on this virtual disk backup format that we've been talking about here so far. But there are some use cases where you may want to back up a physical machine, which can also include a Windows desktop. For this, we have Veeam agents. And I know their company likes to talk about not having any agents, but now they actually have agents for Veeam. These agents require, obviously, the installation of a permanent piece of code on a machine, and they're used then for the capture of those files and folders. Let me then show you where you can go about then creating a job using Veeam agents by defining a protection group. Here under our physical and cloud infrastructure is where we start this process by creating a protection group, essentially a series of computers, either desktops or servers, that we want to protect there using this agent-based backup. When I create the protection group right here, I'll call this, I don't know, my RAS servers, for example. These we'll call physical in this environment. For these RAS servers, I'll choose next down here and define them as individual computers. I could set up a CSV file or use Active Directory objects if I wanted to here, but let me just add in the individual computers onto which I want to install this agent. I'll punch in rras.company.pri, and then I'll punch in the credentials here. These credentials will actually be the domain credentials for the installation of this piece of software. I'll choose OK down here, and I'll test to see if we can now validate the specified credentials. Once the test completes successfully right down here, we know we will be able to inject that agent onto this machine. Next up, I'll choose the next button down here to determine some options. How often do I want to rescan the protection group right down here for any changes that have occurred? Where also do we want to get that backup agent from? In our case here, this is called the distribution server, which we can use our backup server or any other server here in the environment to do. Do we want to install the backup agent automatically? Do we want to auto-update the agent? Do we want to install that CBT driver for the Windows Server OS? Perhaps we do. And if there's a reboot required, do we want to perform that reboot automatically? This RAS server right now is actually routing that traffic as I'm transferring things from my main site to my secondary site, my DR site. So let's not go through the reboot here since that process continues in the background. As before, I have some advanced settings right here where I can limit my bandwidth consumption or restrict unmetered connections or VPN connections or Wi-Fi usage. One of the main use cases for this whole concept of Veeam agents is for desktops, and these desktops may not necessarily be inside the local area network. When that is the case, you may want to limit your consumption or restrict unmetered connections or VPN connections for those, for example, workstations right down here. It's right here where we can determine for workstations or servers if we do want to throttle any of the activities then of that agent. For those virtual machines and their files and folders, do we want to allow file level recovery without an admin account? In many cases, we don't. And any notifications here for the process then of these agents. For this, I'll choose OK down here to accept these advanced settings and choose Next. This will then install the Transport, Veeam Distribution Service, and Veeam Agent for Microsoft Windows Redistributable there on my Veeam1 server. Now, this is my Veeam backup server, so as you can see, these components already exist on that machine. But if I were to choose another Veeam component server as that distribution server, I would need to install these components onto that machine, so making it available for the distribution of these agents. Once I've done that, let me choose Apply down here and begin the process of saving the job. I'll choose Next again and Finish to go about then discovering the virtual machines, or in this case, the physical machines, that we want to perform these backup jobs on. We're currently scanning for these machines, and if I pause things very quickly, I can allow the rescan to complete successfully, as well as the installation then of the agent here on this machine. Full disclosure here too, I actually went and did a couple of other things, so the times are going to seem a little weird here between before and after pausing this, but the process doesn't take that long to complete, and the reboot also doesn't take that long to complete. Once it does, we now have full access here to this machine, rras.company.pri, here as part of our physical and cloud infrastructure. All we need to do now at this point is to actually create another backup job that's focused here on this particular type of machine. And so with this agent on this machine, let's go about adding it to a new backup job here. These types of backup jobs, because they are agent-based, have a slightly different wizard that we have to take a look at here. You can see here that we have workstation type jobs versus server versus failover cluster jobs right down here. And depending on which one we choose here, we can also determine who actually manages the processing then of this backup job. Should it be managed by the backup server, or should it be managed by the individual agent on that machine? Now, for the most part, most servers are going to be always connected there to your local area network. And so the backup server in this case, our Veeam backup server, is probably the right actor to go about managing this backup job. But if we are choosing workstations as opposed to servers, For these, we tend to want these to be managed by an agent. And in fact, we are required to have these managed by an agent. This allows the agent to complete the job when the machine is available and on the network. And so if I'm off the network or if I'm in an area of poor connectivity, the agent can recognize this and perhaps not do the job. In our case here, however, we're doing a server. So let's do the backup server mode over here and then continue to the next page here in the wizard. I'll choose next and let's create this as our RRAS agent backup job number 1. We will direct this to our RRAS server right here. I'll choose next again, and we can identify which backup mode we want to choose. Do we want a volume level backup? So for data volumes, do we want a file level backup, the old school traditional file level backup? Or are we looking to back up the entire computer? This will be an image level backup of that machine. Again, very different from the old school file level backup, which is available right down here. For our purposes here, because this is a server, because maybe we want to recover that server using recovery media, like what you can see up here, let's back up the entire computer, which supports both the entire machine restore as well as the individual file and folder restore. I'll choose next over here, and we'll send this to our Veeam1 DAS repo right here. We'll keep our 14 restore points, and we can configure our advanced configurations here, like synthetic full backups and active full backups. We have some similar configurations like before, so turning on our corruption guard and defining some storage characteristics and notifications and scripts. We've seen all of these before, so let me hit OK down here. I'll choose next, and again, we can enable guest processing and file system guest indexing and all the further configurations that we saw before. Next again, define a schedule, and then finally apply to go about then creating this new backup job with an agent that's installed directly on that RRAS server. And so what you've seen here is kind of a representation of what we've seen already, with a few extra features, particularly those involving file level backups, that we get by having that agent directly installed on those machines. And again, for the most part, although this is additional functionality, you tend to focus these agent-based backups on some special use cases that are outside of your virtual infrastructure.